Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the FMCG Guys. I'm your co-host, Daniel Torres, accompanied by my usual co-host, Efrain Rosario. Hi, Efrain.
Hey, Daniel. Good to be with you as always.
Likewise. Well, I said usual co-host. Now it will be more alternating, but good to see you anyhow.
It's always good to have more members in the family. So I'm not opposed to that whatsoever.
The more the merrier. So
Exactly.
one of the big themes in FMCG and I would say retail to an extent as well this year has been retail media, which was made it big in the US 2 years ago, but it's been really this year where it's made an impact here in Europe. Why do you think it's made such an impact, Efrain?
I think for a lot of reasons, but I think first and foremost is the potential that it represents for a lot of people. I think that in some ways it's very familiar to what some of us who've been in the retail industry for quite a while know in regards to, prior examples of retailers sharing data with brands and how they're able to use that. Yeah. But I think what I want to know, and I think what a lot of people want to know, is what else can you do with it? What's the real opportunity around it? And and I think it's more than just trade deals. And I think it's that expansive opportunity, and the fact that it cuts across both above the line, below the line, it cuts across commercial and media is what makes it really, really exciting.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's a space that will continue evolving. So here at the FMCG Guys, we don't invite random guests. We want to invite guests that have things to say. And we're lately doing an intentional effort to bring the voice of the retailer to the show. So along these lines, today we're accompanied actually by two experts in retail media from the retailer side. On one side, we'll have Ollie Shayer, who's heading up Omni-Media for Boots. Boots, you'll probably nearly all be familiar with them, but they're the largest UK drugstore / pharmacy. And he'll be accompanied by Sam Knight, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the Shopper Media Group, or also known as SMG, and who's Boots' partner in crime when it comes to retail media. Hi guys, welcome to the show. Nice to have 4 people here for once. How are you doing?
Very good.
Yeah, really good. Yeah, great to be here.
Excellent. So for the audience to get a bit acquainted with you guys, Ollie and Sam, maybe you can tell us a bit about each other. We were saying pre-recording that maybe, Ollie, you can start by introducing yourself and what you're doing at Boots.
Sure. Yeah, so thanks so much for having us. I'm Ollie Shayer. I'm the Omni-Media Director at Boots. I've been at Boots for just over 2 years. So my role at Boots is kind of split between 2 parts. I look after all of Boots' core media investment, so everything that we invest through all channels for Boots UK. And then I'm also responsible for Boots Media Group, which is our retail media group arm. And my background has always been in media, a mix of FMCG and e-commerce and retail. So I worked for Sainsbury's, I worked for Diageo, Nestle, I worked for Booking.com for a number of years in Amsterdam, and then also for Echo, and now I work for Boots. So yeah, and over the last 2 years, Sam and I have worked really closely together. We've built Boots Media Group with the team. It's been a great partnership together. So super happy to come on today and talk a bit more about what we're doing. So
yeah. And as we were saying before, I assume that if you both dare to come on the show together, the partnership must be going relatively well.
Yeah, it's going really well. So I think we have a really good partnership. I think it's there's a really good fit between the 2 teams. I think not only in the work we want to do, but also the culture between our 2 companies. I think that's been a really critical part of the work we've done together. Yes, the beginning we're coming on both really liking each other. Hopefully when we leave, we'll be the same.
and it's a good point actually with culture, because I'm a headhunter. As my full-time job, and obviously culture is very important when you hire an executive, but actually coming to think about it, it's also very important when you work with a client. So I like that you hone into this point. Sam, what about you? What do you do, and how come you have such a good relationship with Boots?
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be on your podcast. Thanks very much for inviting us. My name's Sam Knight. I'm the CEO of SMG. We're a group of agencies that specialize in retail media. So we have an agency called Capture that work on behalf of brands like Kellogg's and General Mills and help them to plan all of their retail media across the UK. And then we have an agency called Threefold, which is the agency that we work with Boots on, which helps retailers to set up brilliant retail media networks and retail media centers. And then we have a third agency called Lobster that measures everything. And so across the business, we understand both kind of what the brands are looking for, what the retailers are doing, and also the impact of all of this activity that we're doing, which is an amazing place to be. We're 12 years old. We started it from scratch. My background is from Procter & Gamble. I was the brand manager for the UK for a number of years, and then over in Western Europe, looked over a number of countries across Western Europe, looking after the Gillette brand for a number of years over in Geneva, and then left and joined this business with two other founders. And yeah, it's been an amazing journey from the very kind of start of shopper marketing into what is now retail media. And Boots is an absolutely unbelievable client. They're that perfect mix of a really good cultural fit, whilst also being incredibly ambitious. And so they push us to deliver some incredible work. And over the last 2 years, I think together, the teams have done some pretty breakthrough stuff. So looking forward to getting into it today.
Excellent. Well, it's nice to have you both on, and as Daniel said, it's nice to have even a bigger group than we're normally accustomed to. So it's good to have you both. Sam, Ollie, you actually both mentioned it, or you referenced it, which is that we are at a really interesting period in regards to retail media and the boom that's underway. I was actually, Daniel and I were both at a conference last week where in one of the sessions that I went to, they referenced that I guess there are close to 600 retail media networks in the US alone. They didn't know the number for the UK or Europe offhand, but it's amazing to think that there's that much going on in regards to options for brands and retailers to consider. Can you talk a little bit about, I guess, what you've seen, particularly over the last year, coming out of COVID, and now, you know, although we're still dealing with another crisis in the shape of cost of living, but I'm just curious to see what have been your observations over the last year or so around retail media?
Do you want me to take that one, Ollie, or do you want to?
You start, Sam, and I'll come in after.
Yeah, sure. So it's been incredible. I think for us being part of this world for 10 years, you know, at the very start, a lot of the work that we was doing was trying to convince retailers and brands of this opportunity, and how, you know, if from a brand point of view, you can activate communication at the point of purchase. It has such an amazing impact, not only on that specific consumer, but also on all the other advertising you're doing further up the funnel. You know, increasing that percentage of conversion is absolutely critical. And from a retailer point of view, there's this opportunity to create a whole new, really important revenue stream, but also generate some incredible communication for your customers and drive loyalty. And so we've always believed that it's a massive win-win. But I think what we've seen in the past 2 years especially is a real boom in the industry, and that's been triggered, I think, from a mix of the deprecation of the cookie, which is meaning that brands are looking for new ways to target their advertising, and retailers have some incredible first-party data to do that, combined with evolution of the technology, which is allowing us to link that first-party data with on-site, off-site, and now in Boots starting to be in store as well. So for you know, I'm a traditional brand marketeer, it's incredibly exciting because you can actually identify customers, you can target them really effectively, but then best of all, you can see exactly what happens afterwards, and you can see whether they pick up the product, whether they buy it, how that audience changes. So I think that's what's causing the boom. And you know, we're out in the US recently, and there's been this huge proliferation of retail media networks. I think the next stage is actually seeing who's doing it well and who's doing it poorly, and who's getting the results and who isn't. And then we might see a little bit more consolidation in the market. Because setting up a retail media network is not just having a piece of tech on your website. It involves structural change. It involves a lot of internal ambition, and a lot of retailers, I don't think, have gone on that journey yet. So it's going to be interesting to see the curve over the next few years, I think.
Yeah, how do you see it, Ollie? Because obviously, I mean, even the concept retail media well, you guys will know better than me, but I don't think it was even used 2 years ago or maybe 3 years ago.
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, I completely agree with him. I think it's definitely evolved. It wasn't, you know, when I moved to Boots and to the right, I think there'd always been, you know, the focus on kind of sort of shopper marketing, partnership marketing as a key part of, you know, the kind of work that was done between retailers and brand partners. I think kind of to Sam's point, the evolution of technology, the kind of integration of data, the kind of deprecation of third-party cookies. And I think once people started to see what was possible, particularly from a kind of partner brand perspective, from an FMCG perspective, to measure kind of path to purchase that hasn't been possible previously and effectively see results, I think people are like, well, this really does open up a large range of possibilities as to how I can maybe reshape how I'm investing currently and actually really understand the effect, which maybe wasn't possible previously, particularly with some of my largest retail partners. And I think that shift made a big difference. And then I think, as is the classic case in all things of marketing media, as the industry starts to get more interested in it and starts to generate more noise about it, it begins to kind of cross the desk of all of the C-suites of large-scale retailers and also FMCGs. And that kind of prompts that question about what are we doing in this space? What's happening? So I think that combination of kind of the evolution of what was possible, equally also with the kind of boom of people's kind of interest in what this space was doing, kind of came together at the right time. And it's really interesting because probably 2 years ago, the conversations we were having have very much evolved to where they are today. Now, the demand is much greater as to what we are able to deliver, but also the types of conversation we're having are quite different and with different parts of the business than we might have dealt with previously.
Yeah, you're right, because obviously I think that Efrain, I think we've heard a lot recently about the fact that for retail media, it's a lot of departments that need to get involved as well, no? And I think that companies are still getting their heads around that.
No, absolutely. And I think it's, you know, the question that I always hear is, well, where should it sit in the organization? And then the second question is, well, who should control that budget? Who runs the funding for it? And I think the short answer is it depends. But Ollie and Sam are probably better equipped at answering that than I would be.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, playing the advocate of the devil a bit, like, what's all the buzz about? Because like, how different is, like, for example, the data that you gather compared to like loyalty cards, which were prominent in the 2000s?
Yeah, I mean, so I think obviously Boots has got a very established kind of loyalty card program in Advantage Card. It's been around for 26 years this year. It's got 70 million customers that have an Advantage Card, so it's got a very established base of it. And I think the core thing is, I think the data that's being collected, so transactional data and also customer data, so email, name, these are very similar data sets that have been collected. I think the key thing is now the technology is there to enable that to be used in a very different way to maybe how it was used before. So before you might be able to email the customer or alternatively direct mail them, which we still do and customers love, you know, and but now I think with the kind of expanse of on-site activity, kind of off-site activity where you can connect that data into, you know, data clean room partners and then connect that into other media channels, it really explodes the potential of what was possible. And then I think the data science on it to allow us to measure the effect of a customer seeing something online and then going into store wasn't probably available to us previously, but now is. And so I think all of those things kind of coming together means that we can offer, you know, we can really kind of, I suppose, supercharge the data and the availability of that, and then offer that to our supplier partners in a way that's privacy safe and allows them to utilize it in the right way, and also to reach their customers and our customers together, which I think is maybe slightly different from how it was before, where it was maybe just a little bit more one-sided.
Yeah.
I'd add to that and just say that, you know, from my experience when I was at Gillette, this was always the kind of golden ticket, which was trying to get as close to that point of purchase as possible and be able to influence the consumer as they're picking the products, as they're making the choice. And, you know, you wind back 5-6 years ago, completely agree with Ollie's point. The options you had actually to do that were pretty limited and pretty blunt. I think because of the growth of e-commerce, because of the growth of social shopping, suddenly with this kind of first-party data availability and the availability to targeting, you can be there literally as people are purchasing, literally as they're making their decision. And that's what's different. You know, the data's the same, but the kind of growth of e-commerce and the ability to communicate at that point is now much more advanced, which is why I think there is so much excitement about the channel.
Yeah. So building on that, I guess starting with you, Sam, and then Ollie, would love to get your perspective as well. What would you say are the most typical or most impactful use cases for a brand as they're thinking about, you know, particularly those brands who, FMCG brands who are new to the retail media space? What would you say would be a good place for them to start in regards to use cases as to how to action this data?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think if you're just starting out, I think the first place to look is on the really kind of high ROAS channels, things like search and sponsored featured product, that sort of thing, where you're putting your product effectively in front of the customer at the right time. And that is true for e-commerce, but it's also true in store as well. And I think a lot of people forget that still, you know, in FMCG, especially 80% of your sales are still going through stores, right? And so this is not just about a sponsored product on site, it's about making sure you have the right visibility on the shelf in store as well, and you're connecting that journey. But that's the first place to start. That's what I'd say with the fundamental basics. But then where we get into some really interesting use cases, using Gillette as an example, again, you know, our mission there was to try and get everybody who's just turning into shaving age or 18 plus into buying a Gillette razor. Now suddenly you can identify that demographic really clearly. You can target them through a number of different channels, not just through the retailers' channels, but also through offsite and social and YouTube and Spotify and all of the cool stuff that this data enables you to do. But then talk to them all the way through that path to purchase, all the way through to that conversion, and then understand the impact of it and the lifetime value. So for brands that have a specific target audience, a specific demographic, or a specific ambition and objective, it creates a lot more efficiency in their spend and also a lot more measurement in the impact of that spend as well.
Yeah, I completely agree with Sam. I mean, I think there's definitely the element that's there now is that we've connected our data pretty much to all elements of the funnel. So if you want to run a campaign that's about awareness and understand the effectiveness of that on your customer at Boots, that's possible, and not just probably in the short term, probably over a longer term purchase cycle than was possible. But if you want to build a full path to purchase activity that targets across the funnel, that's also completely possible to do. So I think that kind of either optimization of investment currently. So, you know, to Sam's point of Gillette, when I was at Nestle, it was the same. You wanted to know, like, when I ran my media spend, like, what does it actually do? And otherwise you'd probably wait for the econometrics. Now you don't really have to, because you've got the data more quickly to be able to show that effectiveness. But then also you can deliver much more personalized campaigns. So really looking at, you know, each group of customers by products and being able to tailor that message, I think offers lots of potential there. So, you know, rather than just saying a holistic campaign that was for one, maybe fragrance, you can look at it across how that varies by age, by their purchase, by all of the different elements that you'd want to. So I think that's where it gets really interesting, is that kind of dynamic creative that can go with it. So, and I think the biggest thing we found is it's the close relationship that you have with your brand partners that opens up that, and really understanding what their overall objectives that they want to achieve are, and then now having the toolkit to be able to support them to build that.
Mm-hmm. And thinking from the brand perspective, like all this data that they get from retail media and the way that the consumer behaves there, is it easy for them to connect it to like other insights they have, like in a common panel, for example?
So increasingly, yeah. So if you want to look at like, we're doing more and more to understand not only the effects of kind of performance. So I think we've touched a lot on return on investment, return on ad spend, but also more equity-based metrics as well. So, you know, how is the collaboration between, you know, a brand and a retailer improving the equity metrics of the brand, either directly through customers who've seen that activity, but also, to your point, you can connect that we're working more and more to connect that to broader panels, so you can actually look at those individuals and those people. And we do that already internally as a retailer, and we're looking at how we can start to roll that out more to our supplier base to understand it. So initially within campaign, and then the role is obviously to go further, because I think otherwise it becomes very performance focused, when actually the reality is this is having all of this has an effect on the equity, and where your brand shows up, how it shows up, and how that does that all has an effect.
I completely agree. Yeah, and I think that goes to showing some of the campaigns that we've run with Boots over the past year. I mean, it's not just kind of performance marketing. One of the most successful campaigns we've done is a partnership with Love Island, where Boots have been one of the core sponsors of that show, and other brands have got involved in that activity and being part of that communication. And that's a win for everybody, because it creates brand equity for Boots, it creates brand equity for the partners involved, and it's also really interesting to the consumer and the shopper as well. So completely agree with Ollie's point, the combining those metrics into some brand equity metrics, top of mind awareness, impact on consideration, I think is the next step for retail media.
Can you tell us a bit more about this Love Island campaign? Actually, now you got me curious.
Ollie, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. I'm very happy to talk about it. So we, Boost is the official beauty provider, beauty partner for Love Island. Love Island is a television show within the United Kingdom. It's incredibly popular. It's like a TV dating show where couples go on and are taken to an exotic location where they live together in a villa. And it's filmed over a kind of 8-week period. And what we work with our brand partners on is about how can we bring the brand products into the villa. It's very natural, this is whether that's kind of electrical products like hair dryers, whether that's makeup, whether that's fragrance, whatever it is. It's a very natural thing for it to appear in the show, but also it has real equity for what we can do, not only in the show, so appearing every night in the show, but equally also about how we create content around that, and how we do that in a kind of co-branded way. And then also how we then distribute that through our channels. So whether that's through something like TikTok, where we can collaborate with another brand partner, create content, and then also then measure the effectiveness of that. These are all parts of the work that we're doing. And as Sam said, I think it's an evolution away from just a pure performance focus into something that's quite equity based, but also it's something which is increasingly a theme, which is about the way in which we can work together as brand partner and retailer to create something together that's relevant. So it's been a great process to go through, and we're working really closely with Sam and the team on what the next stage of that will look like. So that's more to come in the summer, I think within the next month or so.
And then you have the perfect excuse to have a guilty pleasure like Love Island, right?
I know. Well, I may only for research purposes have to watch it every single night to make sure so that we're showing up properly. But definitely definite guilty pleasure.
Well, it's I'm showing my age, but it's kind of going back to a theme that Sam, I think you may have referenced earlier, which is that this is if you think about it, this is a new, more technologically advanced version of product placement in the old TV shows in the 1950s and 60s, right? Where they were having, and actually the context makes much more sense, right? As you were saying, Ollie, which is that it's in the context of what they're actually doing in terms of like getting ready to meet with somebody, or to it's just in their room. So contextually, I think it makes a lot of sense. But it does harken back to those product placement opportunities of the 50s.
Yeah, no, I can tell you that Efrain was not watching TV in the 50s, by the way.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah. But the difference, I think, there is that, for the first time, we've seen brands and retailers working together to do that, and that kind of relationship between a brand and retailer has always traditionally been based on negotiation and trying to get the right terms and distribution. But the advent of retail media has suddenly started this whole new conversation, which is about, right, how do we communicate better together, and how do we reach the customers better together, which then in turn opens up all of these event opportunities as well. So it's kind of a secondary benefit of the wave of retail media, I think.
So I love that you brought up that point, Sam, because one of the things that I'm really curious to know and to get both your perspectives on is, what is the impact of retail media with regards to the retailer brand relationship. And I think you've already started to allude to it in regards to kind of it's a new evolution, or it's part of an evolution in regards to how we think about that in, let's say, less traditional sort of ways.
Yeah, and this is, I think, where a lot of retailers get this wrong, where they kind of set up their retail media networks on the side in an unconnected way with what their buying or category teams are doing or what their marketing teams are doing. Actually, I think by doing that, you miss out on a huge amount of benefits, because for a brand, you're interested in communication that drives your sales, that drives your customer experience, and that by its nature needs to be connected to everything else you're doing with that retailer, whether that be trading or promotional plans or seasonality or events. And so I think where Boots have got it really right is from the start, the brief was, how do we integrate this in our business really clearly, but then also create this world where we're really friendly to this brand investment, and we create an environment where we're really open and honest about the impact that it's having as well. And so, you know, our team embedded in the Boots business, literally sitting next to the guys every day that are choosing the products, that are buying the categories, but also the marketeers that are creating the campaigns. And that allows them then to plan the campaigns in tandem with what's happening in the trading calendar and the consumer calendar, but provide, crucially, that level of service to the client. And, you know, when we're in, the other thing I love about BMG is they don't call them suppliers or vendors, they call them clients. And so you're providing a service to those brands to activate those campaigns and those consumers, but tying it into everything else that the retailer is doing in a very discreet but synonymous way. So it's I think that's really, really crucial. And if you do that well, the result is that you create extra value in the retailer and brand relationship, which in turn drives sales, which in turn drives more investment, which everybody wins by. So I think that's where we've seen a lot of the success. I don't know whether you'd agree with that one.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the integration part is the absolute key to it. I think that's even for myself, as my role kind of sits across both marketing and Boots Media Group, it was really key for us because we wanted to have like a deeper integration into those two elements together. And I think, you know, to Sam's point, bringing together all of the different parts of the business as one to focus on it, I think has been really important as a total Boots business and as a partnership. I think the key thing is Sam touched on is this evolution towards much more about partnership, and it's about working together to achieve goals. Maybe when I was a buyer back in the day, it was maybe a slightly different relationship that you have with suppliers, and so I think that evolution towards winning together, which has always been there, but is probably even more present today by, you know, utilizing what we is now available through retail media. I think has been really key to driving success. And I think it is an evolution from where a traditional, like when I started buying maybe over 20 plus years ago, that was it was a very supplier retailer relationship, where it's less of that today. It's more about partnership and growing together.
Yeah. And I imagine that sorry, just one other follow-up, which is that I imagine that the success metrics around retail media really kind of in essence help to reinforce that partnership, right? In regards to saying like, look, we're, like you said, everybody wins, right? So if, for example, if we grow the category and we're able to, in essence, improve penetration on those trips, then the FMCG brand wins, Boots wins. So it's almost like there's these common KPIs or shared KPIs across both partners in that relationship or in that partnership.
Definitely. And I think the other thing is you talk about them more readily with each other. So when you're having sessions together, that's something that probably becomes more of a feature of that. So the team, when they're meeting with our brand partners, are talking about, you know, what are the things that we want to deliver together. So yeah, I think it's a really key part of it. You know, there's not just the negotiation side of it that sits as part of probably obviously the traditional kind of brand and retailer relationship.
And when you look at the brands, by the way, like the way that they are talking to you, the way that they're approaching retail media, like in reflection, is there any like think they're getting wrong, or anything you think brands should be doing better in their approach to retail media? Like any missed opportunities?
Yeah, I would say probably not getting wrong. I think you can definitely see the difference between the brands who have got onto who've started their journey on retail media much earlier. And those are the brands where you're seeing them getting significant success now because they've been operating in it. They got in early, they were willing to test and learn. And it's a mix of brands. It's not just big brands, it's also a range of brands that have done it. And I think those are the ones where you definitely see who've got, I would say, competitive advantage because they understand how the landscape's working now. They understand how to use the tools. They're starting to reorganize even their own organizations to enable them to better take advantage of some of the activity. And I think those things together, that's where you see them. So I suppose the ones who maybe haven't done that may find it more challenging in the future because I think this is a tool that is increasingly going to grow as an offer for partners, and you definitely are beginning to see the ones who've more heavily leaned in versus those who haven't.
Yeah, that structural point is so important coming from, the experience that we got on the capture side. Both, we talked about the retail structure, but the brand structure is just as important, right? So, there are still brands out there that have very distinct brand marketing teams and shopper marketing teams. And the thing about retail media is that it kind of sits in the middle of those two things because it connects the brand activity to the activation. And it's interesting when we deal with brands on the capture side of the business, a lot of those that are doing really well are quite new brands that have structured their marketing department differently. They've just got one marketeer that does everything. And, they look at the full path to purchase and don't have that kind of traditional delineation between brand and shopper. And so I think, where they've managed to overcome those structural issues or change, and I think Ollie's completely right, the brands that have been doing this a little while now are moving in that direction for sure. And there are new roles coming up that are pointing towards that. That's where you see the real investment changes, because then you can see the link between the two and you can connect the campaigns in a really robust way.
I love that guidance. So if we were to put ourselves in the shoes of one of those brands who is getting a bit of a later start in retail media, what would be your piece of advice to them in terms of getting started? What would be what should they go do first? Like, what's that low-hanging fruit for them?
Well, for me, it's creating the right relationships with your retail partners initially. And, there's a number of really good retail media networks in the UK now and abroad, and starting to get their advice and, treating them as an agency, the same way you would do with your media agency. It's like, right, okay, this is my objective. This is my plans for the next year, being really open and transparent about that. How can you help? And then what you'll get back now is some really good ideas, I think, and some really robust tracking that you can analyze, but you've got to have that conversation first. And then I think, if you're dipping your toe in the water, as we said earlier, the first kind of areas to look at some of the performance marketing channels where you can try with smaller budgets and see and learn very quickly. And then also the events that we were talking about earlier, where you can combine that with some other brands maybe that limit your kind of exposure to investment, but have some great awareness metrics behind them. And then test everything and make sure you're getting the data back and make sure that that data is robust and standardized, so that then you can say, right, where is my investment working and where isn't it? And then you can make some choices in the future. But as always, you've got to test these things, even on a small scale, to learn from them. And there's plenty of opportunity to do that out there now.
Yeah, I echo them. I think the biggest advice I'd give is to get started. I think to really think about what it is you go with your objectives that you want to achieve. Be very honest about what they are with your partner, and then really look at where you can start to look at the returns you might be able to get, what their opportunities would be, and then really to get started to learn within the space. I think that's what we've seen with a lot of partners we work with, is really they're starting in certain areas, thinking about how that might work, maybe more performance-based, maybe search-based, maybe display-based, maybe even interactivity. And then really thinking about how they can grow from there. And I think the other thing that's really critical is think about who your customer is within that retailer. That's been a really key part of it, is really thinking about who is your customer within the retailer and how do you want to talk to them. And then equally, if you're not clear on that, then also have the conversation, because of the data that's now available, those are conversations that we can have where we can help brands to understand more clearly the insight around their own customers that might help to make decisions about where they might want to start their journey.
Mm-hmm. And how do you see this ultimately, like this? Essentially, it's like retailers and brands getting to know better their consumer, no, and getting closer to them. But let me put it the other way: how does this benefit the consumer ultimately?
Yeah, well, I'll say that on a kind of some. I think from my side, I think the thing is all about relevancy. So I think relevancy is a really key thing. So you know, if I think back to my early days of kind of marketing, you know, you didn't have maybe the tools that are available now to give customers personalized messaging, to talk to them with personalized content that's relevant to them. And I think it's about giving customers that relevancy of message, the relevancy of product, relevancy of offer to them that I think is really key. And that's the value exchange. So, you know, for customers who are to engage with a retailer to share their data, we have to give the value exchange back to them. And that comes in the more personalized content versus more generalized. So, and I think hopefully it should give them customers a better shopping experience, right? So they shouldn't be, they should be able to better understand what we can offer as retailers and brands together that's most relevant to them, and therefore have a better experience shopping with us. So I would definitely think that relevancy piece is the really key thing for customers. You know, I think hopefully the days of spamming people should be, I'm sure it isn't, but should be behind us. But I think, but that ability to be much more targeted, I think, gets a lot more benefit. Sam, I don't know what your thoughts on.
No, I totally agree. I can echo exactly what you said. I think I saw a stat at one of the conferences I went to recently that is in the top 3 choices now for a customer of why they go to different retailers is whether they get a personalized experience, whether that retailer understands them, you know. And I think retail media offers the opportunity to give those customers, those consumers, ultimately a much more personalized experience, one that's relevant for them, one that makes you hopefully feel that you understand me. And if it's done well, and there's a lot of cases where it's still not done well, and it looks a little bit like a bazaar, but when it's done well, the creative is right, it feels like it comes from the retailer, it feels like a curated experience, and that drives loyalty and repeat purchase, and it means the customer is enjoying their shopping experience. And ultimately, you said, Efrain, earlier, that it needs to be a win-win. Actually, for this to work, and the reason we actually called the business Threefold is because it needs to be a win-win-win, right? It needs to work for the retailer, it needs to work for the brand, but ultimately it needs to be a great experience for the shopper. Otherwise, you're not going to get the returns that you need coming through.
Yeah, the triple win.
Exactly.
Yeah. This has been great. I've been taking copious notes listening to both of you share some of your knowledge. So I'm sure our audience is benefiting from this as well. I do have one final question for you both, and this is actually a bit more, a bit broader of a question. It's actually it's one that we ask all our guests. And I guess I'll start with you, Ollie, and then over to Sam, which is, if you were to be able to go back and give yourself one piece of advice at the beginning of your career, being able to look back on all you've learned over, you know, the years of professional experience you've had, what would be that one piece of advice?
That's a deep.
I'm glad you're going first.
Yeah, there we go. Going first.
No copying, by the way.
Let me have a think. Actually, do you know the thing I would say to myself is be patient. You know, I think you know, one of my bosses always just say your career is long, Ollie. You know, you're ambitious, and you know sometimes that brings with it impatience. And actually, you know, with that, sometimes if you look along the journey, it's actually that part that's actually and it sounds a little cheesy, but that's the bit of my career I've enjoyed the most. The experiences I've had, the people I've got to meet, living in other countries. So I think the experience of it. But in my early career, I was very impatient. So I think maybe a little bit of patience probably would have been That would probably be the advice I would give to my younger self.
That's very London, I have to say.
It's very true. Yeah.
Sam, and what about you? Because I'm curious to know also, because you were talking before about moving from P&G to be an entrepreneur. Like, I know how difficult it is to get people out of P&G, especially in the early stages of their career. And you went like full on, right? Like normally it's hard enough for them to go to another FMCG company, but becoming an entrepreneur, goodness.
Yeah. Some would say naive, I think, was probably the move, but it was, I think my answer is similar to Ollie's. It's like, it's relax. You know, you haven't only got one chance to get this right, and actually taking risks and learning can provide amazing rewards. And I think in those early stages, I see a lot of people wanting to get to the next level, wanting to get the next promotion, but not taking the opportunity to learn all of the things that their job gives them at that stage, that gives them the breadth of knowledge that helps them to build up. And then suddenly these people get to kind of the third rung or the fourth rung, and they're not capable of doing that job because they haven't spent the time learning in the original jobs. And so, you know, when we now have 250 people working for us, which is absolutely mad. But when we speak to them, especially in the early stage, like, just relax and make sure you're learning. We have this idea of stay foolish, which is always ask questions, always look for the answers, and then that benefits you 3, 4, 5 times over when you get further up. So to my younger self, I'd be like, relax and keep asking stupid questions. I think much better.
This was Ollie Shayer from Boots and Sam Knights from SMG. Great episode, Efrain. Had a lot of fun. What are your key takeaways?
There are many, probably too many for us to cover in this recap. I was taking copious notes, but it's as we were talking about before the episode, Daniel, that what's really fascinating, what's really intriguing about retail media is how, and again, it's both familiar in some ways, but also very expansive in others. So I really enjoyed Sam and Ollie walking us through some of the similarities and differences, for example, to loyalty card data, and how in some ways it's a very similar data set to those of us who've worked with the dunnhumbies of the world have seen, but at the same time, it offers much greater actionability around the data. And, it's not just that, but it's the utopia of being able to action that both online and offline. It's like, I can't remember if it was Sam or Ollie who mentioned the golden ticket, if you will, that all of us in this industry are always looking for.
Yeah, I think it was also interesting how they talked about that the next stage will be who's doing it well, no? And the fact that around retail media, and that it all involves setting up a retail media network and how you're linking this back to data and to the brands that are on your network, no?
Absolutely. I think, this is going to have to be part of a broader connected data strategy within both brands as well as retailers. So I think it's fertile ground, let's just say. Yeah.
I also thought it was interesting, and that was a question I was really looking forward to ask them about, like, what's the benefit for the consumer ultimately? And I think they answered it well, no? And the fact that it's a better shopping experience, it just makes it, I think the word is relevancy, right? That it makes brands, retailers be more relevant to the consumer.
Well, and I think, where we landed at the end of Sam and Ollie walking us through that in terms of what was in it, the benefit for the consumer is that it really is a triple win, right? In that not only does the consumer benefit, but the retailer benefits as well as the brand in terms of, like, if we do this right, we all stand to benefit from this in some way, shape, or form, right? And I also thought it was really interesting to hear them, their perspectives with regards to how this is helping to evolve the relationship between retailers and brands, right? In that, we've always talked about, again, some exchange of data when it comes to retailers and brands. And I think where retail media has a really interesting place to play is that how it can expand that relationship. So again, that it's a partnership and that everybody wins.
Yeah, which speaking of partnership, I really like the fact that they talked about having a good culture fit with your like partner or your supplier. Also for me as a supplier to the industry, it really was very interesting to hear. And I think that it really came across. First, they came into the show together, which is already a good sign, right? But really like seeing like how Sam and Ollie are on the same page. I think it's a great reminder that not only when you hire, but also when you choose your suppliers or who you work with, ultimately, it has to be a good culture fit.
Absolutely. I mean, I think culture, I think open conversations and shared KPIs, right? So if we have a shared vision in regards to what success looks like, then we're on a good track.
Yeah. Well, look, great to have spoken with Ollie and Sam. Efrain, enjoyed it a lot. By the way, I think that a great source of information, if you want to learn more about the different aspects about retail media, is our partner podcast, the CPG Guys, where Brian, Efrain, Brian, Peter, and Shri are delivering and creating great content, I think.
Absolutely. I think, those guys continue to do great work. And it was great to see 2 of the 3 CPG guys in Barcelona a few weeks ago.
Indeed. If you didn't see our great pictures, you have to dig back into LinkedIn. Well, thanks also to the audience for listening in. Talking on LinkedIn, do make sure you're following our page there. We're creating great content. We have great partnerships out there, video series every week, apart from the episodes of a podcast, which come every Wednesday. And we'll see you in the next episode of the FMCG Guys. Have a great day.